Today, let us learn about the Spanish tragedy by Thomas Kyd. Playwright Thomas Kyd, a few years older than William Shakespeare, was probably an influential in the development of Renaissance drama, even though he died at the age of 36. Kyd is the author of the Spanish tragedy, which is the revenge tragedy that sparked the hugely popular trend for the theme of revenge in Elizabethan and Jacobean drama. But even more important in the history of English drama is what is thought to be a play he wrote called Your Hamlet. Kyd's most famous and enduring works is the Spanish tragedy. Shakespeare was clearly very impressed with Kyd, as his influence can be seen in the development of his own dramatic writing. There is also more to it. Kyd's verse is immensely powerful, fitting for the extreme emotions that are brought out in the revenge motive. The play is said to be written between 1582 and 1592, and it is considered to be an influential play and created a great impact on the minds of the readers and viewers. The play established a new genre in English theatre called the revenge play or the revenge tragedy. Revenge tragedy, sometimes referred to as revenge drama, revenge play, or tragedy of blood, is a theatrical genre in which the principal theme is revenge and revenge's fatal consequences. Many elements of the Spanish tragedy, such as the play within a play, appears in Shakespeare's Hamlet. The revenge play was adapted from the work of the Roman playwright Seneca, who wrote 9 tragedies based on Greek models. But his plays were meant to be recited rather than performed on stage. They consisted mainly of long speeches, and actions were described rather than presented directly. Seneca's theme was revenge and retribution, and his plays featured crimes such as murder, incest, and adultery, and there is much blood, mutilation, and carnage. Ghosts appeared frequently, and the plays ended in horrible catastrophe. Seneca emphasized that man was helpless to avert his tragic fate, but if he could meet it with stoic resolve, he would in a sense remain undefeated. In the Spanish tragedy, typical Senecan horrors are shown directly on stage rather than being merely reported by a messenger. This appeared to satisfy the more crude instincts of an Elizabethan audience that regularly enjoyed such violent spectacles. It also made for an exciting action-packed spectacle. The Spanish tragedy influenced John Marston Antonio's Revenge, Christopher Marlowe's The Jew of Malta, and Shakespeare's Hamlet. Let us quickly understand the key elements of the revenge tragedy. The play contains several violent murders and includes as one of its characters a personification of revenge. Some characters grow mad or feign madness. We find a character seeking revenge against a stronger opponent for a real or imagined wrongdoing. There are also additional effects like onstage violence, often sensational blood-filled conclusions, disguise, and also a play within a play that often mimics the core of the main action. The use of imagery and language befitting the violence adds color to the events. The main characters of the play are Hieronimo, the servant to the king, who becomes the main protagonist after he finds his son's dead body. Belle Imperia, daughter of the Duke of Castle, falls in love with Andrea and Horatio. Lorenzo aids in the murder of Horatio, great at manipulating others. Balthazar, the Prince of Portugal, who kills Horatio and Lorenzo. Horatio, the son of Hieronimo, a good friend of Andrea. And the ghost of Andrea, who is dead from the beginning and seeks revenge on those who cause him harm. We also have revenge, a spirit that accompanies Andrea throughout the play. He speaks of the living as if they were performing a play for him. We have Isabella, Hieronymo's wife, who kills herself, which leads to the suicide of Hieronymo. The king, who is the king of Spain, a good friend of Hieronymo. The viceroy, the king's Portugal counterpart, dies very dishonorably. Pedrigo, Bel Imperia's servant, who betrays and gets betrayed, and Cerberine aids in the murder of Horatio. Let us get into the plot of the play. The play opens with an exchange between the two members of the chorus, the ghost of Andrea and Revenge. The ghost explains who he was in life, a Spanish knight who loved Bel Imperia in secret, but who was killed in war by the son of Viceroy of Portugal, Balthazar. In his journey into the underworld, he is directed to the court of Hades and Persephone. Persephone instructs Revenge to lead the ghost of Andrea back to earth to observe events leading up to the death of his killer at the hand of his beloved Bel Imperia. Balthazar has been captured by both Lorenzo and Horatio. The King of Spain mediates that Lorenzo will have charge of the prisoner while Horatio will receive the ransom. Meanwhile, the Viceroy of Portugal is made to believe his son Balthazar has been murdered and falls in grief to the floor, casting aside his crown and bewailing fortune for his loss. Horatio and Bel Imperia meet. Horatio tells about her lover Andrea's death, whom he also mourns as his closest friend. Balthazar enters and falls madly in love with Bel Imperia on sight. The ambassador of Portugal sees how well Balthazar is being treated, far from dead, as the viceroy assumes. Hieronymo, the Knight Marshal of Spain, entertains the king with a dumb show in which Spain and Portugal have been made to yield to the English. Outraged that his murderer is feasting, the ghost of Andrea upbraids Revenge, who only assures the ghost in stake opposition how this temporary situation will be reversed. In Act 2, Lorenzo, having noticed Balthazar is completely smitten by his sister Bel Imperia, goes to work to persuade the Portuguese prince that she will, with time and patience, come around to Balthazar's suit. Lorenzo suspects a rival and summons Bel Imperia's servant Pedrigiano to ask if his sister has a secret lover, and he says that it might be Horatio. Lorenzo engages the lovesick Balthazar in a plot to bring about Horatio's downfall. Although the attraction between Bel Imperia and Horatio is turning into love, the King of Spain and his brother, the Duke of Castile, discuss the advantages of having Bel Imperia marry Balthazar. At the meeting between Horatio and Bel Imperia in his parents' garden, Lorenzo and Balthazar abduct Bel Imperia and attack Horatio. First they hang him from a fruit tree, then repeatedly stab him to death with the aid of Pedrigiano and Cerberine. Hearing the commotion, Hieronymo wakes from sleep and finds his son murdered. Act 2 concludes with the ghost of Andrea outraged over the death of his friend Horatio and the abduction of his beloved Bel Imperia. Revenge, however, calmly advises the ghost of Andrea that patience is required until the time is ripe for Revenge to go to work. In Act 3, the false Portuguese courtier Vilupo accuses his true counterpart Alexandro of having stabbed Balthazar in the back during the battle. Alexandro protests his innocence, but the viceroy doesn't listen. Instead, orders Alexandro to be burnt at the stake. Before this can be carried out, the ambassador arrives to inform the court that Balthasar is not only very much alive but is being well treated at the Spanish court. The ambassador also carries the proposal that Balthasar be engaged to the King of Spain's niece, Bel Imperia. Hieronymo's grief is interrupted when a letter written in blood drops to the ground at his feet. The letter seems to have been written by the captive Bel Imperia, naming his sons murderers. Fearful that his crime could come to light, Lorenzo first has the compromised Pedrigiano murder Sabarine, but in the process Pedrigiano is captured and condemned to be hanged. However, the hangman later gives Hieronymo a letter from Pedrigiano, clearly implicating Lorenzo in the murder of Horatio, thus validating Bel Imperia's letter. Hieronymo determines to bring the matter to the justice of the king. Bel Imperia, now a captive in her own home, bewails her losses. When 9 days have passed, Lorenzo figures his sister should be ready to accept Balthasar's advances. However, he has severely misjudged her willful feelings. Both Hieronymo and his wife Isabella show escalating signs of madness. Blocked by Lorenzo at every turn from approaching the king, Hieronymo plots revenge as his only recourse is to obtain justice. Completely ignoring Bel Imperia's feelings, her father, her uncle and the King of Spain and the Viceroy of Portugal have all come to an agreement and set her marriage to the delighted Balthasar. At the conclusion of Act 3, the ghost of Andrea is beside himself with anger that his enemies are literally getting away with murder while his beloved is betrothed to his murderer. To make matters worse, revenge has fallen asleep. The ghost of Andrea rails, but revenge assures him that his sleep is but preparation. The scene of the wedding will also be the scene of vengeance. It is speculated that, given the length of Act 3, it was most likely divided into Act 3 and Act 4 in the earliest version of the play, which would bring the number of acts to 5, as would have been required by the Senecaean model for the classical Roman tragedy. In Act 4, just as the ghost of Andrea has goaded revenge, so now does Bel Imperia vehemently goad Hieronymo to exact revenge, and she swears to do whatever it will take to help him. When Balthasar suggests Hieronymo put on a play to celebrate the wedding, Hieronymo has in mind a revenge play he wrote set in Rhodes. Bel Imperia is to act the part of the betrayed maiden speaking in French. Lorenzo agrees to play the part of the knight of Rhodes speaking Italian. Balthasar plays the part of the cruel Turk speaking Latin, and Hieronymo is to play the part of the murderous Pasha speaking Greek. Although his distraught wife Isabella cuts down the fruit tree from which her son has been hanged, Hieronymo contrives to present the corpse of his son still dangling from the tree as the tableau for the play. The Portuguese and the Spanish, assembled as the audience, are not aware that the knives in the hands of the actors are not stage props but quite real. They applaud the skill of feigning death as Pasha, who is Hieronymo, stabs Horatio Lorenzo to death, and then Persuada, Bel Imperia, fatally stabs Suleiman Balthasar before taking her own life. Finally, speaking in English, the Hieronymo opens the curtain to reveal the rotting corpse of his son hanging from the tree. When the horrified court demands an explanation and the king threatens torture, Hieronymo refuses and bites off his own tongue. When given a knife to sharpen his ink pen to write down his story, Hieronymo instead murders the king's brother and then kills himself, ensuring that the United Kingdoms of Spain and Portugal will have no heirs to the crown. The play concludes as the ghost of Andrea sums up the sequences of murders, asking revenge permission to act as judge to portion out exactly where and how all his slain enemies will spend their eternal punishments. To conclude, the Spanish tragedy is a rich and complex work of drama that has had a lasting influence on the theatre. Its exploration of revenge, justice, power, and grief continues to resonate with audiences today, and its use of meta-theatrical devices remains a source of inspiration for playwrights and theatre makers around the world.